Chapter 4 of Nicholas, a Manhattan Christmas Story by Carroll Moore. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. At Old Trinity. Trinity Church was full of children when Nicholas came in with his two friends.
"We are just in time,"
whispered Anne Carraway as they slipped into the only vacant seats near the mysterious doorway. As Nicholas turned to look again at the closed doors, he saw above them, all along the organ loft, not one, but many flags, the flags of other countries.
"I like to see the flags here,"
he whispered to Anne Carraway. Then, as he sat quite still, smelling the fragrant pine and watching the candles burn above the roses on the altar, far, far away he heard boys' voices singing,
"It came upon the midnight clear, that glorious song of old."
A door to the left of the chancel opened, and out streamed the choir. All over the church the children rose up, looking as if they were starting out on a wonderful journey. Down one side aisle came the choir, and up another, circling the church, still singing,
"Look now, for glad and golden hours come swiftly on the wing."
"The Bishop of New York is walking at the end of the procession,"
Anne Carraway whispered to Nicholas, as the choir and the clergy were taking their places in the chancel. There was a short service, and then the bishop, instead of mounting the high stairway into the pulpit, came and stood at the lower edge of the chancel, as near to the children as possible. Very clearly and beautifully he told the story of the first Christmas Eve, and invited everybody sitting there in Trinity Church to go on a pilgrimage to Bethlehem. As the bishop spoke the last words of his invitation, the mysterious doors opened, and deep in the old doorway there stood a manger with the figures of the Christ child and the Virgin Mary, the shepherds with their sheep, and the wise men with their gifts. At the call of the trumpets the choir boys rose, and, led by the trumpeters, they came down the center aisle to the mysterious doorway, singing,
"Noel, Noel."
Behind the choir came the clergy and the bishop. Then came the children, hundreds of children from all over the city. And the mothers and fathers and friends who had come with them walked beside them. Everyone paused before the manger, then up the right-hand aisle moved the long procession, singing,
"Good King Wenceslas."
Through mysterious rooms behind the altar, the children followed choir and clergy, singing one old carol after another. Down the left-hand aisle they came, until at last everyone had passed by the manger. As Nicholas and Anne Carraway slipped back into their seats, the choir boys were singing,
"O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. Above thy deep and dreamless sleep, the silent stars go by."
"What a beautiful carol,"
exclaimed Nicholas as it ended.
"I've never heard it before."
"It is an American carol, Nicholas,"
said Anne Carraway.
"The words were written by a man everyone loved, who became a bishop, and whenever I hear them sung down here, where the great city of New York began as a little town, it seems to me no larger than the little village where I was born and first heard about him. An aunt to Philip Brooks lived just across the street from my old home, a charming old lady who was the grandmother of one of my playmates. I rocked Phillips in his cradle, she would often say, and she would tell things about him as a baby, a boy, and a man with nieces and nephews of his own. Things which made him seem so real that I grew up thinking of Phillips Brooks as one who understood children and Christmas better than anyone else in the world."
"Did you ever see him, Anne Carraway?"
"Yes, twice in his own Trinity Church in Boston. He was more wonderful than I know how to tell you. I always like to think of him here, for he often came to Old Trinity to preach."
Will you tell me about the big white flag with the blue and gold stars?
Nicholas asked as they rose to leave the church.
It's Trinity's service flag, Nicholas. There is a blue star for every one of the hundreds of men who served in the war, and the gold stars are for the men who gave their lives. The church was often filled with soldiers in wartime. I remember a Sunday when troops of Anzacs came to a service here on their way to France from their distant homes in Australia and New Zealand. The bishop, who was not a bishop then, but the rector of Trinity Church, welcomed the soldiers, just as he welcomed the children today.
John Moon had become separated from Nicholas and Anne Carraway during the procession, and he now joined them as they stood once more before the manger. As they turned to go out from the church by the side door, they met the bishop, wishing everybody a happy Christmas, and looking as if the wish had already come true for himself.
Please thank him for me, Anne Carraway,
said Nicholas.
Tell him I shall come here whenever I am in New York on Christmas Eve.
Now, Anne Carraway had never spoken to the bishop before, but she couldn't well refuse to give a message from Nicholas, and the moment she began to speak, he became a friend on the street of her own little town.
I look forward to this Christmas Eve visit to Bethlehem all through the year, quite as eagerly as the children do,
said the bishop.
That must be why it seems so real,
thought Nicholas. End of chapter 4.